Various species of mythical headless men were rumored in antiquity and later to inhabit remote parts of the world. They are variously known as acephaloi, Greek alpha kappa epsilon phi alpha lambda omicron iota, headless ones or blummies Latin, blummy Greek, beta lambda epsilon mu mu upsilon epsilon sigma, and described as lacking a head with their facial features on their chest. These were at first described as inhabitants of ancient Libya or the Nile system, Ethiopia. Later traditions confined their habitat to a particular island in the Brazin River or shifted it to India. Blummies are said to occur in two types, with eyes on the chest or with the eyes on the shoulders. Various etymologies had been proposed for the origins of the name blummies, and the question is considered unsettled one. In antiquity, the actual tribe known as the blummies were said to be named eponymously after King Blummis beta lambda epsilon mu upsilon sigma, according to Nonnus's 5th century epic Dianegeka, but no lore about headlessness is attached to the people in this work. 2-3 Samuel Bochart of the 17th century derived the word blummies from the Hebrew bli without and moch brain, implying that the blummies were people without brains, although not necessarily without heads. 4-5 A Greek derivation from blumma, Greek, beta lambda epsilon mu mu alpha look. Glance and muo, Greek, mu upsilon omega close the eyes has also been suggested. 6 Wolfgang Helck claimed a Coptic word blind for its etymology. 7 Leo Rianista in 1895 proposed that it derived from Balami desert people in the Bidui tongue, Bija language. Although this theory had long been neglected. 8 This etymology has come into acceptance, alongside the identification of the Bija people as true descendants of the blummies of yore. The first indirect reference to the blummies occurs in Herodotus' Histories, where he calls them the acephaloi, Greek, alpha kappa epsilon phi alpha lambda omicron iota without a head. 12 The headless acephaloi, the dog-headed cynocephaly, and the wild men and women, besides many other creatures not fabulous, dwelled in the eastern edge of ancient Libya, according to Herodotus's Libyan sources. 13 Mela was the first to name the Blumyi of Africa as being headless with their face buried in their chest. 14 In a similar vein, Pliny the Elder in the Natural History reports the Blumyi tribe of North Africa as having no heads, their mouths and eyes being seated in their breasts. 15 Pliny situates the Blumyi somewhere in Ethiopia, in or in the neighboring lands to Nubia. B. 15 16 17 Modern commentators on Pliny have suggested the notion of headlessness among blummies may be due to their combat tactic of keeping their heads pressed close to the chest while half-squatting with one knee to the ground. C5 18 Solinus adds they are believed to be born with their head part dismembered, their mouth and eyes deposited on the breast. 19 The term acephalus, acephaloi, was applied to people without heads whose facial parts such as eyes and mouth have relocated to other parts of the body, and the blummies as described by Pliny or Solinus conform with this appellation. Headless men also appear in the several Asian legends. Breast-eyed races, war chasmen, are recurrent in the Zoroastrian scriptures as the Bunda Hashen, the Jamasp Namig, and the Drakhi Asurig. Furthermore, the blummies are called breast-eyed, Sternif, Almi, in Strabo's Geography. 21 Men without heads, and others whose eyes and mouth were on their chest are mentioned by Al-Kazwizi inhabiting the island of Java. 22 In the Indian epic Ramayana, the demon Kabandha is a headless creature with one eye in the middle of his stomach, and with extra long arms. He is cursed to remain in this form until released by Rama. 23 In the Chinese classic text Classic of Mountains and Seas, the god Xingqian is described as having no head and with his nipples as eyes and his belly button as a mouth. This is because he got decapitated in a battle against Huangdi. 24 The yokai Donatsura in the Japanese folklore is depicted as a headless man with his face on his torso. By the 7th or 8th century, there had been composed a letter of Pharasmin's to Hadrian D, whose accounts of marvels such as bearded women and headless men became incorporated into later texts. This included De Rebus in Oriente Mirabilibus, also known as Mirabilla, its Anglo-Saxon translation Gervase of Tilbury's treatise, and the Alexander legend attributed to Leo Archipresbyter at 26. The Latin text in the recension known as the Firm's letter E was translated verbatim in Gervase of Tilbury's Otia Imperialia, ca. 1211, which describes a people without heads des hommes sans testes of a golden color measuring 12 feet tall and 7 feet wide, living on an isle in the river Brazin in Ethiopia. F. 2930. The catalogue of strange peoples from letter occur in the Anglo-Saxon Wonders of the East, translation of Mirabilla, and the Liber Monstrum. A recension of Wonders of the East is bound in the Beowulf manuscript 3127. The transmission is imperfect. No name is given to the headless islanders, 8 feet tall in the Wonders of the East. G. 3233 Epiphagia Epifugi is the name of the headless and liber monstrum H34. This form derives from Epiphagos in a modified recension of the letter of Pharismans known as the letter of Pramanus to Trajan. Epistola Pramanus Regis ad Trajanum. The letter material was incorporated into the Alexander legend by Leo Archipresbyter known as Historia de Perluis version J237, which was translated into Old French as Roman da Alexandrine prose. In the prose Alexander the golden-colored headless encountered by Alexander measured just 6 feet tall, and had beards reaching their knees. 38:19 In the French version, Alexander captures 30 of the headless to show the rest of the world, an element lacking in the Latin original 39. Other Alexander books that contain the headless people episode are Thomas de Kent's Romance and Jean Walkwillen's Chronicle. Blemise or headless people were also illustrated and described on medieval maps. The Hereford Mappa Mundi ca. 1300 places the Blemmie in Ethiopia, Upper Nile system, deriving its information from Solinus, perhaps via Isidore of Seville. One Blemmie standing has his face on their chest, and another below him has eyes and mouth at their shoulders. Both varieties of Blemmie occur according to Isidore J. 4243, who reported that in Libya, besides the Blemmie born with a face on the chest, there were reputedly others, born without necks, and have their eyes on their shoulders. 44 Some modern commentators believe the two different types represent the male and female Blemmies with their genitals explicitly drawn. 45-46 Another example is the Ranulf Higden map ca. 1363, which bears an inscription regarding the headless in Ethiopia, although unaccompanied by any picture of the people. By the late Middle Ages, world maps began to appear that located the headless people further east in Asia, such as the Andrea Bianco map 1436 that depicted people who all do not have heads. Almines key non-Aban capults in India on the same peninsula as the terrestrial Paradise L. But other maps of the period, such as the Andreas Walsperger's map, ca. 1448, did continue to locate the headless in Ethiopia. M4950 The post-medieval map of Guillaume Letestu pictured above illustrates the headless and the dog-headed cynocephaly north beyond the Himalayan mountains. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville writes of ugly folk without heads, who have eyes in each shoulder with their mouths round like a horseshoe in the middle of their chest, living among the populace in the big island of Dundia, Andaman Islands between India and Myanmar. In other parts of the island are headless men with eyes and mouth on their backs. This has been noted as an example of Blemmies by commentators, though Mandeville does not use the term. Examples of chapters on monstrous races, including the headless taken from earlier sources, occur in the Buch der Natur or the Nuremberg Chronicle 55. The Buch der Natur, ca. 1349, written by Conrad of Migenberg, described the people without heads, Lautenhaupten, as shaggy all over the body with coarse hair like wild animals. But when the printed book versions appeared, their woodcut illustrations depicted them as smooth-bodied, in contradiction to the text. 56 Conrad lumped peoples of various geography under Wondermensten and condemned such wondrous people as earning physical deformities due to the sins of their ancestors. Men called the Uapanoma was reported by Sir Walter Raleigh in his discovery of Guiana to have been living on the banks of the Cora River. Of the story, Raleigh was resolved it is true, because every child in the provinces of Aromea and Canuri affirmed the same. He also cited an anonymous Spaniard sighting of the Uapanoma. 58 Joannes de Layet, a somewhat later contemporary, dismissed the story, writing that these natives' heads were set so close to the shoulders that some were led to believe their eyes were attached to the shoulders and the mouth to their breasts. 20. During the same period, around 1589 to 1600, another English writer, Richard Hakluyt, described a voyage by John Locke to Guinea where he found people without heads, called Blemmins, having their eyes and mouth in their breast. 59 The authorship of the report is ambiguous. 60. The commonalities between Raleigh and Hakluyt writings might suggest the existence of an urban legend at that time, since both were English writers, writing during the same period about trips to different continents, Africa and Latin America. Citation needed. Uapanomas were depicted on numerous later maps using Raleigh's account as a reference. Jodocus Hondius included them in his 1598 chart of Guyana, and in a display various Amerindian peoples in a map of North America released in the same year. Cornelius Claes, who had worked alongside Hondius on numerous occasions, reproduced this display in a 1602 map of the Americas, but modified the Uapanoma to possess a true head but lack a neck, setting the figure's head at the level of the shoulders. Uapanomas began to decrease in popularity as a cartographic motif after this point. Hondius' 1608 world map does not include them, but merely notes that headless men are reported in Guyana while casting doubt on the veracity of these claims. Peter van den Kier's 1619 world map, which includes a clay-like necklace figure in a display of Amerindian tribesmen, is the last to depict euepinomas. Explanations similar to de Layet's were repeated in later years. In the Age of Enlightenment, Joseph-François Lafadou asserted that while acephalous races were actually present in North America, they were no more than a local trait of having the head set deep in the shoulders. He argued that reports of headless traits in the East Indies by writers of antiquity is evidence that people of the same genetic pool migrated from Asia to North America. 62 Contemporary literature say certain writers attribute Blumey's physique as an ability to raise both shoulders to an extraordinary height and ensconcing their head in between four. Other explanations have been offered for the legend of their unusual physique. As noted earlier, native warriors perhaps employed the tactic of keeping head tucked close to the breast while marching with one knee on the ground. 18, or perhaps they had the custom of carrying shields ornamented with faces. 63. Europeans also formerly considered Blumeyes to be an exaggerated report about apes. Likenesses of Blumeyes are used as supports for misericords at Norwich Cathedral and Ripon Cathedral. From earlier local folklore. 65 Writer Lewis Carroll is said to have invented characters based on objects in the Ripon church where his father served as canon, and in particular, the Blumeyes here inspired his Humpty Dumpty character. 66 The four giants who protect the fantasy land of Termina in The Legend of Zelda. Majora's Mask are similar to the headless men, in the matter that their head and torso occupy the same anatomical position. Umberto Eco's novel Bottlenose, written in 2000, features headless men as minor characters. A headless man was also featured as a monster of the week in Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. In it is known as the Headless Horror. Shakespeare's play Othello makes reference to the cannibals that each other eat, the anthropophagi, and men whose heads do grow beneath their shoulders. 67 In his later play The Tempest, Gonzalo admittedly believed when he was young that there were such men whose heads stood in their breasts. 68. In William Maine's 1987 children's book The Blumeyas Stories, a family of Blumeyas spend a year in a medieval priory, carving stories from wood. Gene Wolfe writes of a man with his face on his chest in his 1989 short story collection Endangered Species. In Umberto Eco's 2000 novel Bottlenose, the protagonist meets Blumeyes along with ceapids and a number of monsters from the medieval bestiary in his quest to find Priester John. 69. In his 2006 book La Torre della Solitudine, Valerio Massimo Manfredi features the Blumeyes as fierce sand-dwelling creatures located in the southeastern Sahara, and suggests that they are the manifestation of the evil face of mankind. Science fiction author Bruce Sterling wrote a short story entitled The Blumeyes Stratagem, included in his 2006 collection Visionary in Residence. The story describes a Blumeye during the Crusades who is revealed to be an extraterrestrial. Sterling later stated that the idea for his story was taken from a children's story by Waleed Ali. In Rick Riordan's 2017 fantasy novel The Dark Prophecy, headless men appear as the goons and bodyguards of Emperor Commodus. The creatures turn up on day 304 of the 1001 Nights as translated by Sir Malcolm C. Lyon. The headless men with eyes on their chest defend the brass city where the Ifrit keeps a kidnapped princess as prisoner.